Welcome. I am Halise Lieberman, and it is my pleasure as director of the Toby Center for Jewish Life and Learning to welcome you to the closing TJHTalks webinar of this year. We thank all of you for joining and supporting us, and we look forward to seeing you in January when our new series of monthly webinars begins. I also want to take this opportunity to thank all of our guest speakers who have shared their scholarship, expertise, and passion. Many of you have reached out to us with questions about what is happening in Poland, and in particular, what is happening in our Jewish communities. And we hope that this session, which will take you behind the headlines, will shed some light on the challenges and achievements over the past year. Our program will last approximately 75 minutes, and the 15-minute conversation between our guests will be followed by 25 minutes or so for questions and answers. If you'd like to let us know where you are or to submit a question, please do so in the comment section. And it is now my privilege to introduce our special guests. Janusz Makuch is the founding director of the Jewish Culture Festival in Krakow. The first edition in 1988 has been developed into an annual internationally acclaimed event. The festival spans 10 days and features more than 200 events presenting contemporary Jewish life and culture to Polish and international audiences of more than 30,000 people. Janusz is the recipient of the Irena Sendler Award from the Toby Foundation for Jewish Life and Culture, and in 2018, he was awarded the Honorary Friend of Israel, Yakir Yisrael, title. Michael Shudrich, Chief Rabbi of Poland, has a long and rich history of involvement in Jewish communities both in Eastern Europe and in Asia. After receiving his rabbinic ordination, Rabbi Shudrich served as the Rabbi of Japan from 1983 to 1989, and in 1992, he returned to Warsaw full-time, and in June 2000 became the Rabbi of Warsaw and Łódź. In December of 2004, Rabbi Shudrich was appointed to the position of Chief Rabbi of Poland. He serves Poland's growing Jewish community as the official interlocutor among Polish Jews, Polish government, faith and minority communities, and the Jewish world. Justyna Pawlak, a longtime member of Warsaw's Jewish community, is the Reuters bureau chief for the Central Europe and Nordic desks. Since joining Reuters in 1999, Justyna has worked in Warsaw, London, Bucharest, and Brussels before returning to Poland in 2015. Throughout her career thus far, she has focused on issues ranging from nuclear diplomacy with Iran, Europe's sanctions policy, and democratic backsliding in the eastern parts of the European Union. She is a graduate of Brandeis University and the Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism. Welcome to you all. Justyna, the mic is yours.
Fantastic. Good evening. Welcome, everybody. Michael and Janusz, you two have met a long time ago in the late 1980s at a time that was really momentous in this region. Poland was just transitioning from communism to democracy. The Jewish community here was really facing a time of growth, of hope, and really of rebirth. And non-Jewish Poles were coming up with initiatives, with programs, with events that would eventually help nurture Jewish culture back into life in Poland. We're meeting today at a time that's a little bit different. For many, it's a time of angst. Many members of Jewish community and others are concerned about the future. There's resurgent anti-Semitism throughout Europe and nationalism. There's a sense of backsliding of democratic standards and the rule of law in the east of Poland. Concerns have been raised about here in Poland about the government's treatment of minorities, of women, and of its approach to anti-Semitism. What's more, critics have said the government supports media outlets that publish anti-Semitic content and xenophobic content. Critics have accused the government of manipulating the national narrative in Poland, particularly when it comes to World War II. At the same time, the relationship between Poland and Israel has stumbled at times to its worst in years over issues such as Holocaust scholarship and property restitution. Scholars in Poland complain about a government involvement, they say, that undermines scientific research into issues such as the Holocaust. And finally, Poland's approach to immigration, has been thrust into the limelight amid a wave of immigrants coming to Poland from Belarus. There's been a lot of criticism about that as well. So I wanted to talk a little bit more in detail about these issues, what they mean for the Jewish community and for Poland at large, and how we should be approaching them. Let me start with you, Michael. As the Chief Rabbi of Poland, where do you see in this context the main challenge facing the Jewish community in Poland?
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Justina, and good evening, Janusz and Halise and everyone else. The main challenge remains Jewish education. No matter what happens, unless we're faced with physical violence, which we don't have, the main challenge is continuity, Jewish education, Jewish identity, especially in a place like Poland, in that sliver of Central Eastern Europe, where many of our active members of the community did not know they were Jewish at the fall of communism. And so people are discovering over the last 32 years that they really have Jewish roots. How do we empower them? How do we get them to want to learn more about their Jewish past? How do you build a community with many people who didn't grow up knowing they were Jewish? So these remain the basic challenges. And yes, and there are other challenges, and that is living in a time where nationalism is growing tragically throughout Europe and the United States. And I think it's important not to leave the United States off of this equation. I'm not sure if I understand why, and I don't know. I certainly don't want to spend our limited time together, trying to analyze why is nationalism growing. But nationalism is growing throughout Europe and the United States. And the question is, what do we do about it? How do we engage with a government that is right of center? How do we engage with a government that does have a particular historical narrative? How do we preserve our independence and scholarly independence? And all of these things are still being worked out. For me, the greatest challenge right now is actually on the main challenge right now for me is really the rule of law. Once the rule of law goes, then everything else tends to fall along with that. And so for me, the major challenge and what concerns me the most is the question of rule of law, the treatment of minorities, primarily not even Jews. Right now, the refugees on the border and other minorities are having it much worse. It doesn't mean that we're having it great. Having said all that, I remain very hopeful, because what's very interesting, what I found for many of the Jews that I hear from, the active Jews of Poland, is they're not scared, they're angry. And that, I think, is just to ponder for a moment. They're really angry about things that are happening. And in a bizarre way, it would be better if they didn't need to be angry. But it's not that they're so much afraid. At least this is my read on it. Other people could have other reads on it. It's that they're far more angry that their government is taking certain stances they don't agree with, which means that the Jews of Poland today feel integrated into the larger society and feel they have a voice, and feel that, when they don't like something, they're going to say that they don't like it. It's a shame, and it's wrong that there's a need to do that. But it's also a positive, is that we're fully engaged. I could share with you that last week we had a meeting in the Chancellor of the President of Poland, Andrzej Duda, with one of his ministers. We being 4 key clergy, someone representing the Roman Catholic Church, which is by far the largest religious group in Poland, the Protestants, the Muslims, and the Jews, represented by myself. We wrote a letter to the president and the prime minister. The prime minister did not respond, but the president responded and said, please come to my chancellery, meet with my minister. And the letter was concerning tremendous concern over the humanitarian crisis at the border. In other words, while things are not perfect, I still see hope in that we do have the ability to engage with the authorities and fully express what we see as something that is immoral and wrong.
But the government did not respond. I mean, do you feel like you're being heard? Do you feel like the Jewish community is being heard in terms of some of the concerns that I've mentioned earlier?
Well, when dealing with the government, in my experience, it's never 100%, 0%. There are certainly issues that we aren't heard about. The meeting took place a week ago, less than a week ago. So no, we haven't heard a response yet, but the minister listened and theoretically will get back to us. So time will tell what will happen. In terms of the most egregious thing that happened recently in the last 30 years is the burning of the statue of Kalisz on November 11th on the occasion of the Polish independence, which was clearly provocative, anti-Semitic, death to Jews. It was the worst that you could be in terms of verbal anti-Semitism. And in this case, for the first time that I can remember in several years, actually several government officials did stand up and criticize it. They should have criticized earlier acts of smaller anti-Semitism. They could have reacted faster than they did, but they did react. And last week, on the fourth night of Hanukkah, the President Duda lit the Hanukkah candles in the presidential palace, as we've done over the last 15 years. And at that point, he made a very clear criticism of the burning of the Kalisz statue. One of the slogans that the anti-Semites were using, this is Poland and not Polin, using the Hebrew word. And the president said, this is Polin. So while I do not agree with other things the president has done, including on Jewish issues, in this case, it is important we recognize that it's not completely negative. There are things happening where we are engaging, we are being listened to, not as much as we should be.
Okay. I'm going to change the subject a little bit, and then we'll go back to some of the issues you were saying and kind of pick them a little bit, maybe. Janusz, from your perspective, the Krakow Festival, which you started in 1988, some other smaller events of similar kind. What is their role? What is your role in the context of what we were discussing in bridge building through kind of shared experiences and dialogue in the context of some of the events that we're discussing?
Well, I thank God my role is not meeting the government and the president of Poland. Otherwise, I would feel very uncomfortable because on the one hand, I like, of course, the situation when the president can light the candles, but I do not like that after actually 1 week, maybe more, the people who took a part and initiated this shameful and awful incident in Kalisz were released from prison. So when Rabbi said about the law in the broader perspective, so I absolutely agree that this is something which should be fixed up, but we are living in the country where, unfortunately, the country which is running by this kind of government, where we cannot expect that the law will be fixed up so quickly. Coming back to the festival, the festival has been evaluated. I've been organized this festival from, it's hard to believe, 33 years. So even it's more than half of my entire life. So at the beginning, of course, it was like a manifestation of the desire and the love with the Jewish culture, and a manifestation of a mostly non-Jewish people who suddenly, for their own reason, find in the entire Jewish world the values which they could adopt at their own. And it was in 1988, 1 year because the communists collapsed in Poland. And after that, one of the turning point of the festival was 1990, when the young man from New York called me and he asked me, by the way, he introduced himself. This is Rabbi Michael Shudrik speaking. How can I help you? And it was our first meeting by phone. He had no idea who he's talking with. And I had no idea who is calling me, because I have never ever in my life got any phone call from anyone who can offer me a $10,000. But I took it. So it was a turning moment, absolutely. And Michael came to Krakow, and we met each other. And since that, we became friends, and he helped me a lot. And he's still on the festival. So once again, the festival has been developed, of course. And at the beginning, it was just simply manifestation and presentation of the Jewish culture. But pretty quickly, I understood that the festival, and it is very important what Michael said about the education. The Jewish Culture Festival is nothing else, nothing more like a never-ending educational process. But first of all, it is process addressed to the mostly non-Jewish people, because I'm not Jewish. At least I know nothing about it, and I don't care what people think about you in Poland. So this is a festival which can provide the basic and is providing a basic knowledge, the secular and the religious knowledge about the Jewish world, to the people who are hungry of this knowledge. And the role of the festival, of course, is also initiate the artistic events, especially in the open public space, public like Kazimierz, like Main Market Square, and the other places in Krakow, where the Jewish people who are inviting by us can be more visible, and in this way also people who live in Krakow and the Jewish culture can be more visible than is usually on the daily level. So, and very important thing, actually, it's one of the most important things for me. The Jewish Culture Festival, it's like it's a forum how to fight with the anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism, which is, and unfortunately still will be in my country. So we have to struggle with that. But we are trying to fight with this anti-Semitism, once again, to provide the knowledge about the Jews, about the Jewish world, about the Jewish values, which basically speaking are our values. And the Jewish Culture Festival and its role is also to promote the only Jewish state in this world, which is Israel, of course. And Israel is the most close to my heart, and especially Jerusalem. So every edition of the Jewish Culture Festival is dedicated, less or more, to the Israel. And once again, we are, following the time. We are trying to witness what's going on around us. And the festival is also like a huge mirror, which on the one hand reflects what is interesting in the Jewish film, Jewish art, Jewish literature, and the science. And on the other hand, this is a mirror which also absorbs and focus this amazingly powerful energy of the Jewish culture. So there's a
Janusz,
lot.
you told us yesterday that a couple of days ago that the next festival is going to focus on anti-Semitism, but also the idea of water and the idea of purification. Do you want to tell us how that's important in the context that we're discussing, in the context of current events that we're discussing?
I think that one of the most important things is that we must not conjure reality, which means that, look, I mentioned just Israel, which is so close to my heart, but there is only one country in the world which is trying to reach and get the nuclear bomb only for the one reason. This is Iran, of course, to destroy Israel, the only Jewish state in the world. So I'm just focused. We want to focus on anti-Semitism, which is rising, of course, in Poland, but not only in Poland. When we will take a look to the Europe, I just recently, 2 days ago or yesterday, I watched a webinar dedicated to the situation of the Jews in Germany. And what statistics says is that the Jewishness, the Jewish life in Germany is dying because less and less and less Jewish people were born and more people died. But anti-Semitism is almost everywhere. And the same in France, the same almost in every country in Europe. I remember, like many years ago, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs had a speech to the European Parliament, and he said very clearly, we are facing the new form of anti-Semitism. Of course, this is old anti-Semitism based on the hatred against the faith, against the religious. We have yes, anti-Semitism based on the hate against the race, but we have also new anti-Semitism, which is called anti-Zionism. So the new anti-Semitism right now is just simply anti-Zionism. So I'm just telling about it because we are creating the Jewish Culture Festival, which means that we are focused on the whole entire Jewish world, not only Ashkenazic world, not only the Polish, Galicianer or Litvak world, but we are trying to explore the beauty of the whole entire Jewish world. So I decided to focus on anti-Semitism, but also, and not, of course, not only from the theoretical issues, as the theoretical issues is very, very dangerous, of course. And on the other hand, the water. Why did I choose the water? Actually, I tell you, by the way, you can interrupt me anytime because
I want to hear about the water, and then I'm going to interrupt you.
all right.
Okay.
So this is I will try to make this story very short. After the festival, it was dedicated to the Zion like 3 years ago. I just wondered what should be next, and I opened the Tanakh and actually the Torah, and I started to read this. The first words. Which Bereshit bara Elohim, at the beginning, God created, and suddenly I realized that God created this four amazingly important for us basic elements. So we dedicated 2 festivals: first to the earth, second to the fire, and this year, actually next year, we are going to talk about the water and the different aspects of the water. And beginning with the water in the Jewish liturgy, and finishing with the water as the symbol and metaphor of purification. There is a lot of dirty things around the world. It's a greed, it's a selfishness, it's a hatred. So I just want to put the theme of the water on the higher level, the more mystical even level, but I don't want to lose the connection with the root, because the water, it's also the issue of the climate change, which is very, very important for us. So there is a lot of issues, of course. There is a lot of issues, but basically we are still in the middle, because speaking about the water, we cannot avoid the amazing achievements of the Israelis, who just, created the gardens in the middle of a desert. So there is a lot of wonderful things.
It's a great antidote to what you just said, to what we've been discussing a couple of minutes before about all the worrisome stuff that's happening. So I'm going to bring us back a little bit to the worrisome stuff, so we can use the strength that you gave us from discussing what you just said. Michael, Belarus. We were discussing a couple of days ago, and I remember thinking that you were right. Belarus, what's happening on the border between Poland and Belarus, between Lithuania and Belarus, in the current weather, in the cold, the icy woods. What is the kind of the human tragedy that's happening essentially a few hundred kilometers away or miles away from us? And you said that this is it. This, from the Jewish community's perspective, is our main responsibility: how we deal and how we react and how we act in the face of what's happening there. Talk us through it.
Well, in terms of Jewish values, Jewish priorities, there's kind of, I would say, a tension between two poles. One is, no pun intended, one is that first we have to take care of ourselves. And the other one is we have to take care of those who are most endangered. Right now, people on the border are dying, of freezing to death, of hunger, of who knows what. And therefore, this problem goes to the top of what we need to be dealing with. It is unacceptable, and this was voiced by all the clergy that met last week. It is unacceptable that people should be dying on our borders. It doesn't mean that we have to let everybody in. No. There could be people that don't qualify to be let into Poland, but until we figure out what to do with them, we have the moral, and some would say even the legal responsibility, to make sure they're fed, they have medical care, they're warm. And it is a very frustrating, difficult situation, because Lukashenko, the dictator of Belarus, is doing this on purpose. He's trying to create a crisis for the European Union, and in some ways he's succeeding. And some people are saying, why do we have to solve it? It's all Lukashenko's fault. And half of that statement is correct. It is all Lukashenko's fault. However, in a completely different situation, and not to draw any analogies at all, but it would almost seem to me that people in Europe 80-something years ago saying, well, I have no obligation to help Jews because the Germans are doing the bad things. And therefore, since the Germans are creating this horrible situation, I have no responsibility. And when we look at it that way, it's clear to us that we do have to react. And we are reacting, whether it's the meeting that we had last week, whether it's gathering through, many different religious organizations, gathering clothing, blankets, whatever needs to be gathered, and speaking up that we don't accept this. Now, will the government listen to us? We're in the middle of a story. I can't tell you what the end of the story is going to be. But regardless of what the government will do, we have an obligation to speak out. In the course of all the last few weeks, one story that came to mind was the story of Abraham arguing with God over Sodom and Gomorrah. God made the decision that he's going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, clearly a just decision. But Abraham felt, maybe we don't have to do that, and started negotiating. Maybe 50 righteous, 45, 40, 30, 20, 10. And although Abraham tried to speak out, or did speak out, tried to change the result, he failed. If you want to look at it in terms of a success-based measurement, Abraham fails in his negotiations over Sodom and Gomorrah. And yet, close to 4,000 years later, we still quoted it as a great moral act. So therefore, when we speak out on something moral, we want to be listened to, we want to have an effect. But we also need to recognize sometimes we're not going to be listened to, we're not going to change anything. It doesn't diminish our responsibility to speak out.
I know you've been at the border quite a few times, I think, from
only once. Only once.
Okay. Maybe we've talked about it so many times that it feels like more. Talk us through the kind of the response of the Jewish community right now to the crisis. What are we doing? What are we saying? What is the community's and then also what is the community's response to some of the other issues that I've mentioned earlier that might be a concern?
Okay, so we are collecting clothing and other things that need to be sent to the border. We're cooperating with other religious groups and with other NGOs that are dealing with humanitarian aid. As I said, that the rabbis have been very active in speaking out concerning the humanitarian crisis. Several of our members have gone what's close to the border, because you can't go to the border. I succeeded in going to the border if you want, I could talk about it afterwards. But most people have to work outside, right outside of what's called now the exclusion zone. We have, including the president of the Warsaw Jewish community and several other people that we know from our community have gone and are working to help the refugees as much as we physically can.
Well, I just want to only add one thing, that the border crisis which you are witnessing right now, it's not just a border crisis, it's a crisis of humanity, of your basic values. And I just talked a few days ago, I had a talk with a friend of mine, the great archaeologist from Jerusalem, Dan Bahat, and relating to the situation in Poland on the border, he said to me, if Great Britain did not if they not close the border on 1939 in so-called Palestine, means Israel, approximately 1.5 million people could still be alive. So this is just simply obligation of all of us and each of us to say no. This history cannot repeat itself, and especially in Poland. So I absolutely agree with Michael. It doesn't mean that the people who are sitting right now have to be immediately can enter Poland. Absolutely not. But all we have is blood on our hands. But who cares? That's what it's so painful. Who cares, honestly?
But you see, Janusz, I would say a lot of people care.
No. I'm generalized.
I mean, a lot of people do care.
I know, because I even know that
it's important that people should know that there are a lot of people out there who don't like what's going on, and a lot of people out there, as much as there are people that support what happened in Kalisz, the burning of the statue of Kalisz, there are many people, and this is part of the challenge, that while there were several hundred people at this horrific
I agree absolutely. On the other hand,
there were a couple of thousand people the next day, and an anti what happened rally. In other words, there was a march in Kalisz the next day saying we don't approve of what happened.
But don't you have impression that actually this is typical for Jews, and not only for Jews, that we are still in minority, and we will be in minority, of course. So I'm just trying to.
No, I'm not. A minority in what?
I'm a minority in terms of the reaction of what's going on the border. You know what this guy who is running the TV made? He may organize a huge concert which was watched by the million of the people in Poland. And I want to make it clear, we are on the same boat. There is no doubt that what I said is a crisis of the human values. So there is no doubt that we should be over there and help as we can. But when I said who cares, I also thought about the government, of course.
Of course, the concert,
ordinary people.
The TV concert is is a great tool, as you know, because at the end of the day, a lot of the viewers who did watch it were probably more interested in the music than what's happening at the border, whether in a good way or in a bad way. Whether they're actually.
Maybe I'm too pessimistic in terms of the people. Maybe.
I would just say maybe it's our personalities. I would say there are a lot of people out there who are very upset what's happening at the border, but they don't know what to do. Yeah. That's why.
What do we do about that, Michael? How do we help them figure out something as Jews, what to do?
Well, one way is that moral leadership needs to be seen speaking out about it again and again and again. Meeting with this one, meeting with that one, doing whatever we can. Because if people don't see moral leadership doing something, then they feel that they certainly don't have to do something. Not everyone, but too many people. And what else? We're in the middle of this crisis. We haven't come up with all the solutions. But I do find that, at least from my little world of being a clergy, the fact that I think this is the first time ever that the four leaders of the four main religions of Poland actually wrote a common letter to the president and the prime minister. That act by itself has significance. Is it going to change the world? No. But it's yet another potentially important act.
Janusz, will you try to bring the issue of the situation on the border of immigration? Because at the end of the day, what's happening on the border with Belarus is just a small part of the big immigration story. As we kind of move forward in time, next year, the year after, immigration will only be a bigger and bigger problem. And I think in many ways, the government's various governments' involvement in directing migration flows, in kind of controlling what's happening with migration, both in the positive, but definitely in the negative, will become more and more important. This is a problem that's only going to get worse and significantly worse as we move along, for example, because of climate change. Is this something that you're going to be looking at? Is this an issue, or the kind of the angst, the anger, the frustration, the worry that comes with it? Are you going to be looking to address that?
Well, honestly speaking,
the bridge building that you focus on.
Yeah, I didn't think that we should focus on this drama which we are witnessing right now on the border, because honestly speaking, I could also speak about the borders in Israel, about the borders during the Second World War. So this is still the same problem. But today is, if I remember correctly, December 8th, and the festival will start on June 23rd. And this is a beautiful, actually not beautiful, very wise sentence in Yiddish. Now I'll speak Yiddish. Mensch tracht und Gott lacht, which means, the man is planning and they're making such amazing plans. I will do this, I will do that. And God is looking and he's smiling. He's laughing, actually, not smiling. So we'll see what happens. We're still in the process of gathering the program together, but there is no doubt that speaking about anti-Semitism, we are speaking, of course, we will talk about the hatred, about the this pandemic of evil. This is no doubt. So you mentioned about the water, and speaking about the water, just purification. But just try to imagine these people who are sitting right now on the border in a half of a year or maybe 5 years. no one will die for the gasoline, gold, or whatever. People will start, and actually they die because of the lack of the water. And migration, which is modulated which will start because of the lack of the water, will be much, much more dramatic than this is today. So yes, we will focus on it, definitely. But speaking about a proportion, I really don't know, because we will have anti-Semitism, we have a water, we have many other issues which we wanted. Because the festival is not just a random collection of wonderful, beautiful cultural events. Michael mentioned about education, the St. Jewish Culture Festival, and by the way, running by the non-Jewish people is dedicated to the education. So we've been trying to work together with the organizations, non-profit organization running by Poles who are so dedicated to the Jewish world, like Forum Dialogu or Galicia Jewish Museum, or the Theater NN and Brama Grodzka and Jewish Studies Institute and Jewish Center in Oświęcim in Gliwice. So maybe we would be able to create something together. But right now, I can't find the answer, create the answer that yes, we will dedicate the whole festival or the session only to this issue. Probably not. I just want to create something broader and a deeper perspective on what's going on also on the border.
No, for me, the idea of walls and how we deal with walls, how we understand walls, how we put them up, and how we combat putting them up, or particularly for Jews, is going to be an incredible issue. There's a lot in Judaism about putting up walls. Walls have become a big problem, and I think, philosophically speaking, that's quite a, that's a contrast that we're going to be dealing with as Jews for a long time. Michael, I wanted to change the subject completely briefly and say something about education. There are good things happening as well in the Polish community, in the Jewish community in Poland. There are things that bring hope in in whatever darkness that we're looking at. There is also hope. The new Jewish high school, progressive, smart. It's a great new place that's sprung up in Warsaw. That's having a lot of success. Talk us through, tell us a little bit about that, and tell us about the things where you find hope in these times.
Okay. Well, the Jewish high school is really amazing because it started during the pandemic. In the middle of a pandemic, we opened the Jewish high school, and again, everybody, it's not possible. We don't have kids. What's going to happen? So okay, now we're going to do it. We found an outstanding director, and thanks to her leadership, we're able to really open a Jewish high school that is filled with Jewish values. It may not be exactly the high school that I wanted, but that's absolutely okay. That's normal. But it is created, it is Jewish, it is authentic. That's one thing. The online teaching that we've done since the pandemic. I started, it's almost 2 years ago now. I had no idea. I once saw somebody doing something on Facebook Live. So I said, there's a button, you could push it, you could talk. So this goes back probably March of, it'll be 2020, at the beginning of the first lockdowns. I said, well, people are stuck at home now and not gonna be able to come to any classes. So maybe I'm gonna start giving 2 short classes a day, 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the evening. And the one in the evening went on for about a year. And then as things got better, I stopped it, and I'm still doing 15 minutes in the morning.
It's a great thing to see when you push that button in the morning. It's great to kind of welcome you, and I bet a lot of people are enjoying that.
I was surprised because at the height there were hundreds of people watching this, and it's in Polish. I said, okay, that's good. So that gives me a lot of hope. The fact that in our little world of Warsaw Jewish community that we have been able, except for a few weeks where we had to close the synagogue, we're able to maintain a daily minyan, morning and afternoon, even in spite of the pandemic. And
somebody's joining us already.
I'm not sure.
It went away, Michael, so I think it's okay. I see Halise is joining us.
Okay, can you see me still? Yes.
We can see you and we can hear. Everything is great. I can also see Halise, and that means that she's brimming with questions from the audience. So we're going to maybe let her pose some of those questions. But Halise, you are muted.
Thank you, Justina, for sort of driving this conversation, and for Michael and Janusz for all you shared so far. We realize that this is really not a lot of time to delve into these questions. Certainly there are these academic questions, but mostly certainly passionate and emotional questions that drive us all. But our audience has asked us several questions, and the first one I would like to go to is Roberto Rus asks us the following questions, which will be printed in front of you. He asks us, what about the situation or the what's going on that we need to acknowledge, of course, that people who are LGBTQ plus communities have been harshly targeted, certainly in the past several years, even more so. And why he asks, why is there silence? So Michael, can you first be the first to...
you know, part of the great challenge is that when you talk, that somebody hears you. I've been attacked in the far right press for my stance on LGBTQ. We've also met with the president, and we raised the issue that as much as we're concerned with anti-Semitism, we are concerned also with attacks on LGBTQ plus. So I'm
Maya.
Roberta, I only wish that you were able to that we were better at getting the message out of what we are doing, so that everyone should know where we stand. That while I know what the Torah says, but every human being has the fundamental right to be who they want to be, and that we will always defend.
And I want to add something also, Roberto. I don't know if you have ever been to Poland, but in terms of especially young, but not only young people who are against any kind of prejudice and hatred, we are more than open. And for instance, our festival is running the Header Cafe, which is openly pro LGBT and all people. We have a flag, not huge flag, but significantly in the right side. So we are more than open, and this is not true that there is a silent. Baruch Hashem, thank God, this is not a silent. There are still people who openly are staying against the official governmental policy, because this is the issue of just simply human being values. So no, we are not silent.
Thank you both. I think it just drives home the issue. In this short time, Justina, Michael, and Janusz will continue with several questions. The list is growing, but the headlines, and Rabbi Shudrik, you mentioned this, the headlines say one thing, but and the caption under a photo says another. But we need forums like this to really talk to people who are not here, who care about world Jewry or people in general and issues, humanitarian issues, to really go beyond those headlines and to make sure that people are involved with all of us in the fight against this kind of humanitarian justice. Rabbi Shudrik, you're often interviewed. And so that maybe you could speak to this next question. which comes from, and also you've been involved in helping people or reaching out to people who are looking for their Jewish roots, sometimes with confusion, certainly with some kind of complete, sometimes shock. We have a question from Christina Lagowski, who writes, as someone who discovered I was Jewish at the age of 34 in Canada, how easy is it for Jews to come out of the closet in Poland today? Michael.
Everyone has a different experience. We certainly are there for anyone that wants to taste, to learn, to experience something Jewish. How easy it for that person? I don't know how easy it is for every person to come out of the closet in Poland, but all I could say is that we are there to make it easier. We meaning the rabbis throughout Poland, we meaning the JCCs, Hillel, the Jewish communities. We are there to help make that journey as easy, painless, and meaningful, and uplifting, and inspiring as possible.
Janusz, would you like to add something to Michael's comments?
No,
Of course
actually,
he wants to add something.
no, not this time, not this time. This time I dare to ask the question. I want to address my question to my great friend of mine, Michael Szudry, who is the chief rabbi of Poland, because I want to make it very clear. People, you know how it is, people can be a little bit confused. Because I'm running the Jewish Culture Festival, which I have organized from 33 years. So people can think that this is a Greiser Ayit. I'm not a Greiser Ayit. So I just want to ask Michael, in terms of the more and more young, and not only young, Polish people, non-Jewish people who are so involved in the Jewish world, who don't want to convert themselves. How can we help you, Michael? How can we help the Jewish people in Poland? What is good for the Jews in Poland, which we can co-create with you and for you? I'm asking about it. I'm asking in terms of anti-Semitism in Poland and broadly in Europe, but I'm first of all asking because of the future of the Jewishness in Poland. We met 30-something years ago when we were almost a little bit. Exactly. So for instance, I treat very seriously the sentence "midor ledor." When I have started to organize a festival, I was a 28 years old guy, and right now I'm an alte Kaka, 61 years old guy. So I rather think about the future in terms of the people who would be able to continue our, I don't know, I don't dare to call it legacy, but maybe I should use this word, because I have no doubt that this word should be used and addressed to you, Rabbi Michael Szudry. So how can we non-Jewish people help the Jewish people to create the so-called our common, Baruch Hashem, Jewish-Polish Jewish brotherhood, if it is possible?
No, of course it's possible, because we've been doing it for over 30 years. So therefore, it is possible because we're doing it. Most important thing is to talk, is to meet and to talk. And each group that's going to come forward, we're going to find something else to do. I'm not going to try to offer a solution, a one size fits all, because different people will have different strengths, different people have different interests. But I think the fact that one practical thing that everyone can do, and they don't need anyone else to do it with, and that is, if you ever hear an anti-Semitic statement, a joke, simply let the people around you know that that's unacceptable. And I would say that also if you hear an anti-Black, an anti-LGBTQ, an anti-Muslim statement, you should do the same thing. Simply I'm very sorry. If you want to continue in this line, I'm going to leave. That's unacceptable to me. Now, I just want to make sure the people that hear this don't try to do this if it's like late at night, 4:00 in the morning in a bar and everyone's drunk. That may not be the right moment to say that and leave with all of your teeth. But in general, if more people start saying, that's unacceptable what you're saying, whatever form of hatred, xenophobia, anti-Semitism it might be, maybe we can start making a change.
So, Justina, I would like to take back the mic, if I may, and to thank you for posing these questions, which we could, and to Michael and to Janusz, we could be here all evening. I think we will meet again, because these are questions that we talk about every day. It's something that circulates, as does how do we do more together. And I would say that we have an incredible balance of what the puzzle looks like. So the puzzle has many pictures here in Poland, but certainly around the world. But in terms of what we've shared with you tonight, in terms of I would say from the Jewish perspective and from the non-Jewish perspective, which is really the essence of how we live together. It's not a dialogue, it's not a discussion, it's not theoretical. It's that what we do is that we create space. We create spiritual space, we create social space, we create space for each other. And the festival opens spaces for knowledge and understanding, and the Jewish community and all of the other organizations open space for Jews and non-Jews to really connect with Judaism, with their own Jewish roots, and with the roots that are so embedded in Poland. So to all of you, to Justina, Michael, and Janusz, thank you for joining us. The discussion, a Jewish discussion, we know never ends. It just goes to the next parsha, the next portion of Torah, and then we come back again.
Something. Okay.
So do we have a chance to end?
Please,
30-second statement?
You both have a 30-second statement before we say goodnight. Or
Janusz, you go first.
Janusz, please. And then Michael.
Well, you have a lot of enemies. You always had a lot of enemies, but you also have friends. And let's fight together for a better future, just together. And that's it. That's why we are doing this festival.
Amen. Michael,
Amen.
Thank you.
Amen. I would say I add something a little longer, but I make it much shorter. When democracy came to Poland, it was incredible excitement. People were discovering, they were coming out of the woodwork, and people like Janusz were doing amazing things. And there was such a vibrancy and excitement. And people wanted to get involved, and people wanted to help, and people wanted to support us. And so what I would really stress is that now, when things are not as perfect as we want them to be, when we're hearing things that we never thought we'd hear again, now is not the time to leave us. Now is the time to get involved, to support in any way that you can, even more so. Now is the time to stand with us.
Amen. Absolutely.
Thank you, Justina, Janusz, and Michael, for your passion, your commitment, and the conversation. And thank all of you in our audience. And I want to also send a shout out to our incredible team, Jakub and Kaya, who make this all work so beautifully. And if you would like to support TJHT Talks, there will be information in an email following this conversation. And we look forward to having you join us next year. In the meantime, please stay safe, stay well, and we wish you all a happy New Year. We'll see you in January. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Justina.
Thank you,
Alice.
Thank you, Justina.
Thank you all.
Schönen Dank. Toda